Imagine a young man full of dreams and hopes living a peaceful life in his homeland, when suddenly everything is destroyed by a relentless war. This young man is Daniel. He was taken from Jerusalem, his home, his sanctuary, and carried away as a captive to the distant and powerful Babylon. His eyes saw the beauty of Jerusalem replaced by the foreign splendor of an unknown land. Daniel was not just an ordinary young man. He was part of the elite of his society, chosen for his intelligence, appearance, and nobility. But now he found himself in a land where his culture, customs, and above all, his faith were constantly challenged. In Babylon, Daniel and his friends underwent an intense process of assimilation. They were given new names, Babylonian names, in an attempt to erase their Jewish identity. They were taught the language and literature of the Chaldeans, an effort to root them in Babylonian culture. But despite all these attempts, Daniel kept his heart firm in his faith in God. The first major test of his loyalty came when Daniel and his friends were invited to partake in the court's meals, sumptuous banquets filled with foods and wines forbidden by God's law. Refusing these foods was a great act of courage, a direct affront to the king and his hospitality. But Daniel, with wisdom and tact, asked permission to follow a simple diet of vegetables and water for 10 days to prove that his faith in God's laws would not weaken him but strengthen him. And so, at the end of those 10 days, Daniel and his friends were healthier and more robust than any of the other young men who feasted at the royal table. This simple act of fidelity was a powerful testimony to the strength of his faith and the constant presence of God in their lives. This is the essence of young Daniel, an example of integrity and devotion in a world that tried in every way to erase his identity and faith. He teaches us that even when we find ourselves in strange lands and face immense challenges, fidelity to our principles and trust in God can sustain and distinguish us. As Daniel and his friends established themselves in the Babylonian court, their abilities and wisdom soon caught the attention of King Nebuchadnezzar. It was not only their health and appearance that set them apart, but the depth of their knowledge and the clarity of their understanding. They were different, and that did not go unnoticed. In a short time, Daniel and his friends were promoted to prominent positions. But the promotion brought new challenges. Being so close to power meant being constantly under surveillance, surrounded by temptations and political intrigues. Many in the court envied the growing influence of these young foreigners and sought ways to bring them down. However, Daniel remained unwavering. He stood out for his honesty, integrity, and above all, his unshakable fidelity to God. No matter how intense the pressures to conform or compromise his values, Daniel always found strength in his faith. One of the most critical moments for Daniel in the court came when King Nebuchadnezzar had a disturbing dream that no one could interpret. The king's distress was so great that he threatened to execute all the wise men of Babylon if no one could reveal and interpret his dream. It was an impossible demand. How could they know what the king had dreamed without him telling them? But Daniel, with his unshakable trust in God, asked for time and prayed fervently for the mystery to be revealed. And God heard his prayers. In a night vision, the king's dream and its meaning were revealed to Daniel. With courage and humility, Daniel presented himself before Nebuchadnezzar. He explained that the king's dream was a prophetic vision of kingdoms that would rise and fall, starting with Babylon, represented by the golden head of a great statue. Each part of the statue symbolized a different empire until a stone, not cut by human hands, struck the statue and destroyed it, establishing an eternal kingdom. This was the kingdom of God. Nebuchadnezzar was amazed by the precision and depth of Daniel's interpretation. He acknowledged that Daniel's God was truly powerful and promoted Daniel to an even greater position of authority. Additionally, he honored God by declaring that there was no other God like Daniel's. This event not only saved the lives of Daniel and his friends, but also consolidated their position in the court. More importantly, it demonstrated that Daniel's wisdom and strength came from his faith in God, a powerful testimony in a pagan kingdom. Daniel's fidelity, even in the face of mortal danger, teaches us that trusting in God can carry us through the most impossible challenges, revealing his glory to the world around us. Daniel's influence in the Babylonian court continued to grow, and with it, the visibility of his unwavering faith in God. But this same faith would be tested again, this time in an even more impossible situation. King Nebuchadnezzar had another dream, a dream so disturbing that it left him without peace. But there was a problem. He could not remember the details of the dream, only the anguish it caused him. Desperate for answers, the king summoned all the wise men, magicians, and diviners of the kingdom and gave them a frightening order. They had to not only interpret the dream, but also reveal to the king what he had dreamed. It was a superhuman task, and when none of the court's wise men could meet the demand, the king, in his fury, decreed that they all be executed. The news of this deadly decree reached Daniel's ears. With the same confidence that had sustained him so far, he approached the king and asked for time. He knew that divine wisdom was his only hope. Together with his 3 friends, Daniel prayed fervently for God to reveal the dream and its interpretation. That night, God answered their prayers. In a vision, the king's dream and its meaning were revealed to Daniel. Full of gratitude and courage, Daniel presented himself before Nebuchadnezzar. He made it clear that the revelation did not come from his own wisdom, but from the God of heaven. Daniel described the dream in detail. The king had seen a great, splendid, and terrifying statue. The head of the statue was of pure gold, the chest and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of bronze, the legs of iron, and the feet partly of iron and partly of clay. Then, a stone cut without human hands struck the statue on its feet, shattering it completely. The stone grew and became a great mountain that filled the whole earth. With precision and clarity, Daniel explained that the statue represented a succession of kingdoms. The head of gold was Babylon, the empire of Nebuchadnezzar. The other metals symbolized future empires, each inferior to the previous one. The stone that destroyed the statue and became a mountain represented the eternal kingdom of God, which would triumph over all human kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar was astonished. Daniel's revelation confirmed the power of the God of heaven and the wisdom given to Daniel. In an act of reverence and gratitude, the king fell prostrate before Daniel, acknowledging the greatness of his God. He promoted Daniel to a position of the highest honor, making him governor of the entire province of Babylon and chief of all the wise men. This event not only saved the lives of Daniel and his friends, but also consolidated their position in the kingdom. More importantly, it showed that true wisdom and power come from God, a testimony that resonated throughout Babylon and beyond. The story of the forgotten dream and Daniel's divine wisdom reminds us that even in the most desperate situations, trust in God can bring light and understanding, revealing his glory to the world. The story of Daniel is not complete without the incredible narrative of his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Like Daniel, these men were captured and taken to Babylon and stood out for their unwavering faith and integrity. King Nebuchadnezzar, in a moment of vanity, decided to build a huge golden statue and ordered everyone in his kingdom to bow down and worship it. Whoever disobeyed would be thrown into a fiery furnace. The music played, and everyone bowed down except Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their devotion to God prevented them from worshiping any other. The news of their disobedience quickly reached the king's ears, who, furious, ordered that the 3 be brought before him. Nebuchadnezzar gave them one last chance to bow before the statue. Otherwise, they would be thrown into the furnace, and he challenged, "And who is the God who can deliver you from my hands?" With courage and firmness, the 3 friends replied, "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Enraged, Nebuchadnezzar ordered that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. The soldiers who threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the furnace died due to the intense heat. But to the king's and everyone's surprise, the 3 men were not consumed by the fire. Nebuchadnezzar stood up in shock and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, your majesty." The king, astonished, exclaimed, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar approached the opening of the blazing furnace and called out, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. The miracle was evident to all. Nebuchadnezzar recognized the power of the God of Israel and decreed that anyone who spoke against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would be severely punished. He declared, "There is no other God who can save in this way." The three were promoted to even higher positions in the kingdom. This story is not only a demonstration of God's power to save, but also a powerful testimony of faith and courage in the face of adversity. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego show us that true faith does not depend on circumstances. It is unwavering even in the face of mortal danger. Their trust in God, regardless of the outcome, teaches us to be faithful, knowing that God is with us in all situations, protecting and guiding us. Time passed, and a new king ascended to the throne of Babylon, Belshazzar, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. Unlike his grandfather, Belshazzar did not recognize the greatness of the God of Israel. He was an arrogant and irreverent leader, disregarding the lessons of humility and respect that Nebuchadnezzar had learned. One night, during an extravagant banquet, Belshazzar, in an act of disrespect, ordered that the gold and silver vessels that had been taken from the temple in Jerusalem be brought. He and his guests used these sacred vessels to drink wine, praising the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. This act of desecration would be his ruin. At the height of the feast, a mysterious hand appeared and began to write on the palace wall. King Belshazzar turned pale with fear. His legs trembled, and his heart was filled with terror. He called for all the wise men, enchanters, and diviners of the kingdom, promising them great rewards if they could interpret the writing. However, no one could decipher the message. The Queen Mother, hearing the commotion, reminded the king of Daniel, a man endowed with divine wisdom who had interpreted dreams and mysteries for Nebuchadnezzar. Belshazzar ordered that Daniel be brought before him. When Daniel arrived, the king offered him riches and power if he could interpret the writing. But Daniel, faithful and upright, refused the gifts and declared that he would interpret the message for the king. He began by recalling the arrogance of Nebuchadnezzar and how he was humbled by God until he acknowledged divine sovereignty. Daniel then confronted Belshazzar for not learning his grandfather's lesson, accusing him of exalting himself against the Lord of heaven by using the sacred vessels for idolatry. Daniel turned his attention to the writing on the wall. Mean, tekel parson. He explained the meaning. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Parson, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night, while the feast continued, the armies of the Medes and Persians, led by Darius the Mede, invaded Babylon. Without resistance, the city fell and Belshazzar was killed. Thus, the great Babylon came to an end, and the empire was divided between the Medes and Persians. The writing on the wall and the fall of Babylon are a powerful reminder that arrogance and desecration do not go unpunished. God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and exalts and deposes rulers according to his will. Daniel's courage in speaking the truth to power, without fear of the consequences, inspires us to be firm in our faith and upright in our actions, trusting that divine justice will prevail. With the fall of Babylon, the empire came to be ruled by Darius the Mede. Recognizing Daniel's wisdom and integrity, Darius appointed him as one of the three main administrators of the kingdom, responsible for overseeing the satraps and protecting the king's interests. Daniel excelled so much in his work that Darius planned to set him over the whole kingdom. This imminent promotion aroused the envy and hostility of the other administrators and satraps. They sought to find some charge against Daniel but could find no corruption in him, because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God. So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever." The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered, "The decree stands, in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." Then they said to the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, "Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth, "May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." The story of the lion's den highlights Daniel's unshakable faith and the divine protection he received in response to his fidelity. It is a powerful reminder that God is always present, ready to save and protect those who trust in him, regardless of the circumstances. Throughout his life, Daniel not only stood out for his wisdom and integrity in the court of powerful kings, but was also blessed with visions and prophetic revelations that shaped the understanding of the future of kingdoms and the end times. These visions, recorded in the last chapters of the book of Daniel, are rich in symbolism and significance. One of Daniel's most notable visions occurred during the first year of the reign of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. In a dream, Daniel saw 4 great winds stirring up the great sea, and 4 large beasts emerged from it, each different from the other. The first beast was like a lion with eagle's wings. As Daniel watched, its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. The second beast looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh." After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard. And on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. After that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. In my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind disturbed me. I approached one of those standing there and asked him the meaning of all this. So he told me and gave me the interpretation of these things. The 4 great beasts are 4 kings that will rise from the earth. But the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever, yes, forever and ever. Then I wanted to know the meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others and most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws, the beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell. The horn that looked more imposing than the others and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the holy people and defeating them until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom. He gave me this explanation. The 4th beast is a 4th kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time. But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will worship and obey him. Daniel's visions of future kingdoms and the end times are full of symbolism and power. They remind us that, despite the rise and fall of human kingdoms, God's kingdom is eternal and invincible. Daniel's trust in God and his ability to receive and interpret these divine revelations teach us about the importance of faith, patience, and perseverance as we await the fulfillment of God's purposes. The book of Daniel is a narrative rich in examples of faith, courage, and unwavering trust in God, even in the face of the most severe adversities. Daniel's life and his friends in Babylon are not just a series of miraculous events and prophetic visions. They are a true lesson on how to live a devout life in a world that often opposes such devotion. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego faced immense challenges. They were taken from their homeland, exposed to a foreign culture, and tempted to deviate from their beliefs. But through each trial, they remained firm in their faith. This steadfastness is a powerful testimony to us all about the value of perseverance and integrity. Faithfulness in all circumstances. From the beginning, Daniel and his friends showed unwavering loyalty to God. They refused to defile themselves with the king's food and wine, choosing instead to remain faithful to the dietary laws of their faith. Their decision, based on trust in God, resulted in superior health and wisdom, demonstrating that God honors those who are faithful to him. Courage in the face of persecution. The courage of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in facing the fiery furnace is one of the most inspiring moments in the Bible. They did not bow to Nebuchadnezzar's golden image, even under the threat of death. Their declaration that God could save them, but even if he did not, they would not worship other gods, is the supreme example of unconditional faith. Integrity amidst envy and conspiracy. Daniel, by continuing his daily practice of prayer despite Darius's decree, showed that integrity and devotion to God must be maintained, even when it means facing dangers. His survival in the lion's den is a testament to divine protection over those who remain faithful. Divine wisdom and interpretation. Daniel was blessed with the ability to interpret dreams and visions, a gift he always acknowledged as coming from God. His interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the writing on the wall for Belshazzar, and his own prophetic visions teach us the importance of seeking divine wisdom and understanding God's plans for humanity. Hope in an eternal kingdom. Daniel's visions of future kingdoms and the establishment of God's eternal kingdom give us hope. They remind us that despite the world's turmoil and uncertainty, God's kingdom is immutable and eternal. This kingdom will be a place of justice, peace, and true worship, where God will reign sovereignly forever. Lessons for today. Daniel's life teaches us that true faith is not just an internal belief but a daily practice. Whether facing powerful authorities, threats of death, or the everyday challenges of living in a world often hostile to faith, Daniel shows us that perseverance, prayer, and trust in God are fundamental. Today, we are called to follow this example. In a world that often tries to divert us from our values and faith, Daniel's story is a powerful reminder that God is with us. He sustains us, protects us, and eventually rewards our faithfulness. As we reflect on Daniel's life, we are encouraged to live with the same unwavering faith, knowing that our God is powerful to save and that his kingdom is forever. Thus, Daniel's journey from a young captive in a strange land to a visionary prophet teaches us that faith and perseverance are our greatest strengths. In all circumstances, let us trust in God, live with integrity, and wait with hope for the fulfillment of his eternal purposes.